welcome to another exciting video. In this one, we'll be learning how to manipulate the DOM with React refs hook. Now, React is really good at creating and updating DOM elements, but sometimes you need to work with them yourself. A common use case for this is when you're using a third-party library that wasn't built for or with React specifically. To do this, we need to have some value that's associated with our component like state to store a reference to the DOM element, but doesn't trigger re-renders when it's updated unlike state. React has something specifically for this and it's called a ref. You create a ref object with the useRef hook and that object's current property is the current value of the ref. It can be anything, but if you pass that ref object to a component as a property called ref, then React will set the current property to the DOM element it creates so you can reference it and manipulate it in your useEffect hook. In this lesson, we will be learning about making use of ref hooks and we'll see how that works with a cool library called Vanilla Tilt. So here you can see that we have made use of the Vanilla Tilt library, and what we have done is we have created few classes like tiltRoot, tiltChild, and totally centered. Over here we have our function component called tilt and it's expecting some parameters over here. If you see, this is just returning a div with a class name tiltRoot and then a div with another class name called tiltChild, and then whatever values we have are passed over here as children. Now let's go to the app which is being rendered. So here we see that we have a checkbox over here which shows show tilt. So if we have this checked, it is showing up this, and if I uncheck this, it is going to move it out from the browser and you don't see it anymore. So if the show tilt value is set to true, then we are rendering this tilt with this class name totally centered, and this is the content that is being passed as the children for this particular tilt component. Now if the show lit checkbox is not checked, in that case we are not showing anything, as you can see over here. And here the checkbox has this on change event set show tilt, and it's taking e.target.check, that is the checkbox current status, whether it's checked or not, and based on that it is setting the value of show tilt. As you can see over here, we have made use of use state and the default value that is set is true. So set show tilt is then used when a checkbox is checked or unchecked to ensure whether tilt component should be shown or not. Now what we are trying to do over here is add some animation effect using the Vanilla Tilt JS library. Now to do that, we will have to make some changes over here, and the first change is to ensure how we will be getting access to this particular component when it will be rendered in the browser. And for that, we will be making use of the ref attribute over here. So this is the component that we are trying to identify when it's rendered. So for that, we'll be having a ref attribute, and here the ref attribute, we can specify the tilt ref. Now this tilt ref we will be defining within this tilt component. We will be creating it and we will be making use of react.useRef, and this now is referring to this particular div. Now in order to understand how this component is connected now, what we can do is we can make use of a console.log message over here and then see what exactly this tilt ref is showing. Ideally it should show the component div that we have over here. Now if I go ahead and rerun this, open up the console log, and here we have the div tiltRoot, but the better place of accessing this is by making use of the React use effect. So here React use effect, we will be basically passing this tilt ref, and this tilt ref has this property called current, as I mentioned earlier, which is going to give access to this particular div element. To get that, we will be defining a variable, let's call it as tilt node, and we'll be assigning tiltref.current to this particular variable tilt node. The other attribute that we will be having is from the vanilla library, vanilla tilt.js, and here we'll have our vanilla tilt options created. So these options are max speed, glare, and max glare. Once we have that, we'll again make use of the vanilla library, and we will be setting it up like this, vanilla tilt.init, and at the time of initialization we are passing the div node. So we are basically passing this div as reference to this, and here we have provided the options that we just now created. Now once that's done, what we can do is simply save this, and now you'll notice that we have the animation coming up. But a couple of things that we need to take care of is that if I keep on unchecking and checking this, even though it seems like it's working fine in the browser, but what is happening behind the scene is that references are being logged in the memories, and ideally they should not have been. It's just the last interaction that we had should have been updated. So in order to avoid that scenario, what we can do is we can return this particular thing. So what we are saying is get the current node and have the vanilla tilt.destroy called upon it, so that every time this re-renders, we have only one instance in memory. Apart from this, we also need to ensure that a couple of things should not be executed. Like when it's being destroyed, we should not be having the vanilla tilt init in effect. And to do that, we will be again making use of the dependency array, and this time we won't be passing anything. It's just going to be an empty array, and this is going to ensure that when this is being called, this is kind of excluded. Now, other reason of having an empty array over here is that none of the variables in our use effect callback can change, and that is the reason why we are not listing any dependencies here. What this is effectively saying is I want to run this when the component is initially mounted to the page, and then I want to run this when the component is unmounted from the page. That's another useful optimization we have made for this case. So to review, the thing that we wanted to do is make this DOM node do some fancy stuff, and we included vanilla tilt on the page so that we could do that. We also included some CSS from the vanilla tilt library itself to make our DOM nodes look really fancy. To get access to the DOM nodes, we initialized vanilla tilt on it. We are using the ref prop, as you can see over here in the div, and we pass the thing that we did back from a React useRef call. That ref has a current property that we can use to access the current value of this object. The reason that useRef is an object that has a current property is so that we can mutate the current property to be whatever we want without triggering a re-render of our component. We can use refs for more than just DOM nodes like we are using here. We can use it for any value that we want to keep track of and mutate over time without triggering a re-render of our component. After a component has been mounted, our use effect is going to be called. We get the tilt node from our tilt ref custom property. We create some vanilla tilt options and pass those to the initialization for our tilt node with vanilla tilt. Then we return a cleanup function so that we can remove all references of our DOM node in vanilla tilt and remove all the event listeners that vanilla tilt put on our DOM node.